Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Warcraft news. And you know what? It's a pretty darn interesting one because beta's just kicked off, so that's one thing. The prequel novel to the expansion has came out, and well, there's also some fun Taronda stuff. Actually, if you're interested in sort of how Teldrassil is going to be resolved, don't worry, I'll give you spoiler warnings, but that's here too. Whole bunch of stuff, including Blizzard actually making a few more tweaks to patch 8.3. So, all interesting, all good fun. Of course, if you want to support us and, get some cool stuff in return, we haven't really talked about it too much, but on Patreon, it's the Warlock class pin. It is the art pack that I think you'll probably see that we did that around the time we kind of thought, the new Ratchet and Clank kind of looks like Ratchet and Clank level 1 a bit. And, of course, the Tyranid Oak special. You'll get all of that stuff into your mailbox. So, patrons, thank you for all of your support. And with that said, okay, let's just get straight into the Warcraft news. Well, the first bit of news this week is pretty darn simple. Shadowlands beta, it's actually happening, it's a thing, and you'll know if you're in it by just going onto the Battle.net app and clicking on the account section. If you're in, you'll have a beta account. If a beta account's not there, then you're not in. They don't send beta keys or anything like that from the past. So if you get a beta key email, guess what? It's a scam. So that's the way to do it. Just, of course, ensure that you are actually opted in for the beta on, on the Battle.net account page. But yeah, that's basically what's going on there. From what I've gathered from interviews and stuff, they are sending out invite waves roughly on a weekly basis, and there will eventually be character copies, probably after a character wipe that will happen at the end of this month. So really, we're pretty much getting there. And that actually does bring me to the next news topic that I wanted to talk about. It's something that really covers our team's experience in this beta, and that is the damn high quality of this test. Now, I remember trying to give you guys max level class stuff back in BFA in its beta, and it absolutely bloody sucked. And one of the reasons why was that the only way to quickly get a max level character was on a PvP only realm, and that might be fine if you could have, say, went to target dummies, but you couldn't. And that really did hurt just so much our ability to actually test stuff in BFA, including the stuff like the Azerite. It absolutely sucked. It was terrible. It's one of the reasons that expansion had, slight flaws, let's just say. A lot more than that. Now, for this, what we found, well, you can actually, when you log in, you have a character creation template for your Covenant choice. That makes you a max level character and just shoots you into Oribos, and you can choose whatever Covenant you want. Now, that means you can easily test all the different soul binds, all the different conduits, and all of that stuff. And that just means that testing is so much easier, and I think that is really quite cool. Then there are loads of NPCs that'll give you Covenant resources to help test that. Flascator, of course, he's around, a staple from alphas, betas, and PTRs. There's also a make your own keystone NPC, and basically, right, this is so much better than it's been in the past. Now, there are, of course, lots of issues, especially with the Covenants, just some balancing stuff, and particular, not really balance, but just the quality of some of the design of the Covenant ability. So there's stuff to cover there, which we'll do in the future, but basically the fundamentals of our ability to use this beta as a platform to actually critique the game and to work out how we can help Blizzard make it better via feedback, which, by the way, that's the point of a beta. That's what they want us to do. Basically, that platform is so much damn better than it's basically been in a long-ass time, and that's a really good thing. And I suppose on the topic of changes happening based on feedback, we got something fun, which was from Preach's conversation. That's something, we suffice it, we are going to cover it, but, right, the Conduit reversion. So whenever I talk to Ian, you will have seen my video on that. Well, he basically said that, yeah, I asked him essentially that, your conduits, which you slot into your soul binds, they give you, effects like, your ice lance damage is increased by 5 or 10%, whatever. Things like that. You slot them into your soul binds. But if you have one in a socket, and then you put another one in, your original one is destroyed. It operates like gems. And I basically said, Ian, with our gems and the way the glyphs were when they first came out, they got destroyed because that was kind of creating a scarcity in the market, and that made a lot of sense for the professions. Why is it the case that you're building in a scarcity system with conduits? And Ian basically said that that's because they want us slowly upgrading each particular soul bind, and they don't really want us to be having a bag full of conduits where we just sort of swap them in and out all the time. And that's why they decided to make them be destroyed in the same way that Legion relics were. Now, this was a bit weird because a lot of players just didn't really like this system in general, but then also the more top-end players, right, the sort of min-maxer types, well, they had this thing where they're like, okay, but we could just farm loads of these conduits. We could have loads of dupes of each different one, so we basically could min-max like every single encounter by swapping our conduits around, because we could just get an excess of them and burn through them like a resource. Now, of course, that's not really a good thing. Ian said that's not a good thing, and I'm actually a little bit worried because I think that they're changing it, right? They're making it so that the current system on beta is not going to be there. But I would say, if the only reason why they're doing that is so that the top end aren't just sitting there grinding out, dungeons and stuff forever to get loads of dupes, then I'm actually a little bit worried, because I think it's maybe missing on some of the fundamental, maybe sort of emotional player experience-driven reasons why people will have not really liked this being a sort of destructible system, rather than, say, a library system where maybe you unlock, you unlock your conduits, you can just sort of drag them on and sort of customize and build out your character really as much as you want, and the freedom kind of being in your hands there. But the point basically is that Ian said to Preach, that they don't have a new design to present us, but that the current system that is on beta, where they're destroyed like gems and you can kind of farm up multiple of them by doing a bunch of content, that is not going to be what hits live. And I think this is really something that is a good thing to actually hear from Blizzard. That whole situation of grinding dupes so that you can always min-max, that would really suck, but I do think that's a slightly niche problem. And for me, it was more just that I think the system doesn't feel good when they're destroyed, and it feels like I would be punished for trying to experiment with build diversity and actually just tweak and design my RPG character, which to me is something that's decently important for an RPG. Suffice to say, though, we will have to see what Blizzard does. Personally, if I was trying to think of an easy solution here, I would say just make it a library that automatically upgrades whenever you get a new drop, right? And kind of like an Essence sort of situation. And then it's a thing where, are these conduits going to be a massive driver of sort of repeated gameplay because you're going to want loads of them? No, not really, but are they just a thing you can unlock and then use? Yes, and fundamentally I think that would actually be better in the long run than just sort of another kind of treadmill-y system where you're just kind of grinding through a whole bunch of resources. So really, I think that would just be a more simple system that would have not really a massive amount of upsides, but also remove a whole bunch of downsides, and would kind of just be going back to the good old adage of KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I think just something like that would be a lot easier, but we're just gonna have to wait and see what Blizzard actually does. Anyway, with that said, let's move on to some miscellaneous things for the beta. So, add-ons are available on beta. That's pretty exciting. There's a few things that add-on devs will actually have to adapt to, but for us testers, it does mean we can actually test the beta in an environment that's a bit closer to how we actually end up playing the game. So that was pretty cool. Then also there are new versions of Volcanic and Bursting. Now this is kind of interesting because these new versions no longer scale with your max health, but for Volcanic what it actually does do is give you a knockback that actually does knock you, or knock up even, that knocks you up enough to actually give you some fall damage. But the way that it's actually working is that because it's kind of like just flat damage instead of percentage of max health, what happens is that it scales up as you move up the keystones in terms of difficulty, and then Bursting has also received the same treatment. So that'll be interesting for the Mythic Plus players. Gotta admit, I'm not a big Mythic Plus person. I'll just sort of do it with my guildies from time to time whenever I'm, probably playing the game like I was in 8.3. But other than that, I don't really mind that much. So if you're an experienced M Plus player, let me know what you think about the state of the fixes in general, because from what I understand, there has been a little bit of contention there, but there were recent fixes to Tyrannical where it no longer impacts like boss ads that people are pretty happy about. So I'd like to know what you've got to say there. And then the only other thing we've not covered thus far on the channel is Flappy Bird. Yep. It's time for Flappy Bird to be in World of Warcraft in the form of a Kyrian world quest, or Bastion one. So that was a little bit weird. Frankly, it doesn't really look that good. It really seems like it should be shorter and you should be moving a bit faster towards the right when you're playing it. So that's my feedback for that. And with that said, that's our sort of beta business out of the way. Let's talk about a little bit of lore. Humongous spoilers, obviously. This is just a Shadowlands thing, but of course it's sort of following on from Teldrassil and Tyrande, so I know a whole bunch of us are pretty interested in that story, given that Teldrassil was itself a little bit of a dramatic situation, a bit of a controversial one. So, basically, right, there's this sort of narrative where Tyrande is all hyped up with his Night Warrior power, and basically a whole bunch of people think she's going to totally lose the baps and sort of turn into a bit of an evil character, go so far in pursuing her vengeance that she kind of becomes what she sought to destroy. Some sort of situation like that. So, you are there with Chandris, who's kind of like Tyrande's adopted daughter, really, and you're trying to go after Tyrande, right? And you're going up through Torghast, trying to hunt her down. And it really is quite interesting because Tyrande, you know, she does look a little bit more edgy with her new armor, but suffice to say, she's got a massive hate boner for Sylvanas, which we all, of course, knew, but also a very evil voice. Like, this Night Warrior business for her has now got to the stage where she actually sounds like a villain. She just, of course, is one that, you know, we've sort of liked in the past. But what ends up happening anyway is we actually free the Teldrassil victims that were trapped in the Maw, and we then take them back, and this is part of the Night Fae Covenant quest, and we take them back to Ardenweald, and they basically go and get to, you know, be with the forest, right? So they can turn into whatever little furry creatures they want to, you know, tend to the forest, help resurrect the wild gods, do all of that fun Ardenweald business. So that's basically the fate of those Night Elves, and I bet that makes some sense. It's kind of nice, right? They all died in this terrible way. They're, of course, big people of nature being Night Elves. They end up in Torghast. It's pretty horrible. Where do they end up resting? They get to go to Ardenweald. I think that seems, decent enough, although I mean, I don't know, man. Teldrassil, maybe a bigger topic for another day. But the point is, with Tyrande, I mean, she's not very happy at the end. She is going 100% for that sweet, sweet vengeance, and she runs off so comically fast that her animation basically doesn't make any sense. But she zoops off pretty much, she's gone after that. From what I understand, she runs away up Torghast to go after Sylvanas, and that's it. I actually suspect, personally, that we won't see her until a future patch. And that would mean, I think, that we should expect some sort of major Tyrande-Sylvanas confrontation, a whole bunch of things happening there. And, you know, it could be the situation where it's like, is Tyrande supposed to fall to the darkness of the Night Warrior in order to get what she wants? You know, a bit like how Arthas, right, he wanted to get Mal'Ganis so much that, he sort of turned into a right dickhead, and that's kind of Arthas's plotline. A little bit more there. But with Tyrande, is that what they're going to do? Are they actually going to turn her into a villain? Personally, I really hope not. I really hope not. I think it would just be retreading ground we have done narratively before, and I think it would just be just a bit of a one-note waste of her character, to be completely honest with you. And honestly, that's a character that I'm a little bit salty with its treatment in general, like just the Night Elf stuff around patch 8.1. We've talked about that with Syra and Delara and how it didn't really make that much sense, how quickly they turned. So that was a bit weird. And then, there was like Illidan comes, and the two people that don't really get to talk to him, like in a person-on-person scene, are Malfurion and Tyrande. So I'm still a little bit suspicious of Blizzard doing Night Elf lore, to be completely honest with you, but certainly Tyrande's an interesting character. And if you know anything of our channel coverage as well, we love talking about Elune. We really do. Some of you don't really like how much we talk about Elune, and I kind of do get that, but when we're looking at this Tyrande stuff and her falling to the darkness of the Night Warrior, you've then got to realize, well, the whole Night Warrior thing is an aspect of Elune, right? You've got sort of like, Elune, the mother, the sort of moon goddess, and then you've got Elune, the Night Warrior, and they're kind of like, two different aspects of the same sort of god character. And I think that's really interesting, because if Tyrande starts to go into this really dark place, it does tell you that Elune is not this, like, morally good, maybe lawful good, sort of moral god deity character. That actually, Elune does have that moon goddess that we see all the time, but that Elune also can, really dish it out when she needs to. Is it kind of like that Il'gynoth quote, where you've got this like sort of shining surface masking shadows below? And I don't think that's something that's about Elune, but I do think that that's maybe an area they're going to explore with Elune, who of course has been described as like the one true deity that we know of, and certainly seems to be a character I'm honestly thinking maybe bigger than a first one, bigger than a Titan, like some sort of real fundamental character. So a little bit of lore there. Should be kind of interesting to see how it pans out. And with that said, well, there's also Shadows Rising. Shadows Rising is the prequel novel, and it's out. I'll say no spoilers, but it really does set the scene for Shadowlands, while, why certain characters are actually there. It goes a little bit more into Shadowlands stuff than I actually thought it would. I thought it would have been mega focused on, like, Azeroth and just sort of like those characters and trying to hunt down Talanji and all of that. But yeah, there's actually, there's some spooky stuff going on with like Maw and some of those Sylvanas scenes as well, which is kind of interesting. Then also, there are hints in the book so far of, things that could happen in Azeroth while we're away. And on that, I would definitely say, keep an eye on Turalyon, Illyria, Lillian Voss, and Tandred. I absolutely see that. And then, of course, a whole bunch of character shag. That's it. This seems to be a very big novel for finally getting a whole bunch of those ships to sail. So that's also going on. Of course, if you would like to get that audiobook for literally free with Audible, who are one of our sponsors, yes, sponsor this video, I suppose, as well, then you can check out our Audible link. At least in the US, it is out there. You can just get it immediately. And yeah, you get the book with a 30-day free trial, but that's just on your Audible account forever, even when you're not a paying subscriber. So you actually do own the book forever. So if you want to do that and support the channel, then doing that via our sponsor, Audible, is one way to do that. So that's what's up there. Now, there is actually another bit of book news. And before you all be like, oh, books, really? No, Exploring Azeroth. This is a really interesting one. So there's a new book coming out, and the reason I bring it up is because the front cover art came out, but basically it's exploring Flynn and Matthias Shaw, their adventures through the Eastern Kingdoms. And you might be thinking, okay, I don't care. But here's what I would say to you, and why in the office we're actually super interested in this book, to the point where I really want to see if we can get a review copy for Blizz and like do some cool stuff on Embargo Day. It comes out like October 20th, but we see so little of day-to-day Azeroth in World of Warcraft. Like anytime we see some pamphlets that are talking about Lordaeron, like that lore video we did, we get really excited because we're like, oh wow, the day-to-day happenings on Azeroth, we finally get to hear about them, instead of, you know, what sort of batshit cosmic stuff our sort of super powerful player characters are doing. A lot of us are also just thinking, what's going on in Anderhall these days? What's the economic situation in Westfall? You can see that's like sort of boring stuff to some people, but to a lot of other people, that's the foundations of the world, and it's really tying into those places that we know, we care, that we really went through in very, very ponderous, slow detail back when we were very slowly crawling our characters up way back in the day. And I really think that this book has got the opportunity to be like Chronicle in a way, but kind of like Chronicle for the small things, for the small details. You know, if they did, there's an Eastern Kingdoms book coming out, but if they then did a Kalimdor one, maybe a Northrend one after that, then essentially by the time that series of Exploring Azeroth books was out, if it is going to be that, by the time that would all be out, what we'd actually have is a series of books that, you know, canonically, we're off in the Shadowlands, and then this series of books, of course, following Flynn, Fairwind, and Matthias, through those books, we actually get to see what's going on in Gadgetzan, what's going on in Stormwind, like the actual state of Azeroth, which is something we know barely anything about, really. Like, what's going on in Gilneas City right now? We just don't really know so much of this stuff. So I think that book has got massive lore potential. And when I think about how Shadows Rising is setting it up so that, you know, there's that Terralion, Ilaria, just, you know, stuff that there could be stuff going on when we're away in the Shadowlands. If that book's setting that up, and then we look at this other book, hopefully a series of books, that's actually going through just the state of Azeroth in general through the lens of these two characters, I think it could just be setting up some real cool stuff for the future. So, suffice to say, I'm pretty excited. Then next up, let's talk a little bit about customization, because we've just heard some stuff in interviews, and I think it's kind of interesting. So one thing that was confirmed is that the city guards and the civilian NPCs will be getting the full Shadowlands treatment in terms of character customization. So basically, you'll be seeing a more diverse bunch across Azeroth. Now, I think some of that's actually, you know, pretty cool. As an example, you're going through Ironforge. It might be pretty sweet to see like an area of more like Wildhammers, now that that's a thing. Or, you know, like all of the different troll tribes being represented, you know, in like the general horde characters. Same goes for Stormwind, which, you know, is like, Stormwind is pretty central to the Alliance. So actually being able to show more of the Alliance in Stormwind, I actually think that stuff's really nice. And I mean, it'll help us get away from that problem where, you know, you've got all of these guards and, you know, half of them look the same, right? Because, you know, they're literally like the same model copied. So I actually think that's pretty good. Now, on the topic of all of these character customizations, well, Polygon interviewed the art director, Eli Cannon, about all of this stuff. And Eli said that the team are actually very aware of how well received the character customization updates have been. And this is the great bit. He actually said that they continue, or that they're continuing to plan a whole bunch of updates that they're actually making a priority for post-launch. So basically, it seems like players have responded so well to all their customization work that Blizzard are now actually increasing its priority and thinking, we should like actually do more of this in future patches. That's really exciting. And he actually explains that the customization design process was overhauled greatly for Shadowlands, and that because of that, we're actually just going to see more consistent updates to all of that stuff. And really, when I read into that and I think about, like, you know, with the stuff that we do, we see a whole bunch of students and we get to see a whole bunch of the 3D workflow, so it's maybe just sort of sort of indicating they've done a whole bunch of like base work, you know, on their rigs and their models and all of that stuff, and they've designed it such that they can easily add things in the future, whereas it really seems like in the past, you know, a whole bunch of stuff was just really old, really out of date in the way that it was done, and that really slowed down Blizzard's ability to actually give us more here. So it seems like they've worked on the fundamentals, and now we're actually reaping the rewards of them doing that good fundamental work. And then there was another tidbit just while we're on the topic of customizations. Ian actually kind of suggested that they could introduce sub-race specific quests, but he was very clear that this is not something they're doing right now. It would be a long way off, but I'd definitely be interested in that. Like, it does make you wonder at just other like emergent changes that could happen from these broad customization updates. Now that after these customizations have happened, you know, you're not just a dark spirit troll. You're not just an Ironforged dwarf, right? There's so much more going on there. So I really think, in terms of just getting us some nice lore in game, it would be really cool if all of the different sub-races that have basically been put into the game via the new customization options, if they can actually just get some cool content. I think that would be a really good move. Anyway, with that covered, let's hop over to a brand new system that's being added into the game, where there is going to be a formalized way for veteran players to help newbies. They can, if they actually hit the requirements, be a mentor. They'll get a special icon and the ability to answer questions in the newcomer chat channel. Now, the criteria there are level 60, BFA Pathfinder, part 1, and then having an account in good standing, which basically is just going to mean, you know, not having a pattern of breaking terms of service, stuff like that. And I think this is interesting. I mean, if you put that in line with Exile's reach and Blizzard generally trying to work on the new player experience, it really does seem like they actually just want that to be a better, more positive experience. Probably, I'd say, Blizzard of this situation where, you know, because they'll get the telemetry and all of this, they'll probably see that lots of WoW accounts are being made, and lots of them are bouncing off because the new player experience is a bit rough. Now, one other game where this is fully implemented is, of course, Final Fantasy XIV. And even with the Final Fantasy XIV one's like very high barrier to entry, there's not really that much respect for mentors in the game. Some people actually call it the Burger King crown, so I don't know how much this will actually work for WoW. And I definitely say that Blizzard should be careful in sort of placing implicit power into the hands of individuals that they cannot necessarily control. So I'm interested to see how this is going. I think there could be some issues, but in principle, I certainly like what they want to do with it. Then next up, a little bit of interview stuff and controller integration, where John Haidt, who is like, I think the like lead producer or something like that in WoW, he did temper some expectations on like WoW ever coming to console, and he said, great question, a question I ask the team from time to time, and basically not that much more, which isn't really a surprise to me. And it's kind of weird because the controller support is really there for more of an accessibility thing, though as I did point out in a video, that controller support being there, that stuff actually working for Final Fantasy XIV, and then Blizzard in BFA patch 8.1.5, I believe, adding in better multi-threaded support, which would work a lot better for the system architecture of, well, most modern computers, especially on Team Red, and of course, like the architectures of the new consoles, that there's like stuff like that would actually would make it way more viable on consoles, as sort of opposed to the past. To be honest, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but I will say, I wouldn't be surprised if Blizzard tried it, because ultimately, with World of Warcraft, it's got this humongous audience on PC. They're eventually going to tap most of that out, and maybe Blizzard will just be looking at the bean counting and they'll think, well, why not try putting it on consoles, right? Maybe we could increase our reach. And certainly I could imagine there being a lot of pushback from more like traditional PC players there. I totally do get that, but it could be something that could make sense for Blizzard to do in the future, purely thinking from like a financial perspective. Now, moving on from that, there is something that really disappointed me, and it's something I want to do a video on at some stage, because man, archaeology is so cool in principle, but what we have heard from interviews is that archaeology will not be receiving a rework in Shadowlands, and that it's sort of not a really big thing on their radar. And it was really just this appearing in the interview that for me is a reason to mention it in a WoW News video, just to say, and we will try to do a proper video outlining how archaeology could be one of the coolest things ever. We'll do that in the future. But I kind of just wanted to include it here to say to you, like, hey, archaeology, the fantasy is so cool. Look at the puzzle box of N'Zoth and how much in the way of lore speculation videos and just player interest you got from things like that. Or the amount of people like me who hunted down Zinrock the Destroyer on Cata launch for a really long ass time and never got it, but, you know, kept on logging in for it. Just saying, Blizz, big opportunity there. You should really take a look at it in maybe the expansion after Shadowlands. Anyway, with that said, let's hop over and talk about patch 8.3. There's actually quite a lot of stuff going on with the game. So, First up, okay, we've got a whole new effect at 200 corruption called Inescapable Consequences. And it just takes 25% of your health as damage every second, so yeah, it kills you. That's what it does, and that's basically just an effect saying, hey, calm down. It's time to stop corruptions. Now, as for stopping corruptions, well, corruptions are leaving the game with pre-patch. And this is unlike other things like essences and Azerite, which actually just sort of fade out as you move from BFA to Shadowlands. So really the corruptions, as soon as it flicks over to that pre-patch, they're gone. They're deleted from the game. That'll be it. Now, what is interesting here is that lore-wise, there's a justification. It's been confirmed that as of pre-patch, N'Zoth is dead, and Azeroth has been cleansed of his corruption, and that's why the corruptions are gone. And I'd just say that maybe that puts a bit of an end to any speculation of a sort of near-term N'Zoth resurgence. It really is. N'Zoth is dead and gone, and if I was to read in between the lines of some other interviews, the only way you'll see N'Zoth is that, like, his essence will go somewhere now that he's been destroyed. It won't just go into a new baby N'Zoth inside Azeroth that's just going to pop up again later. No, it's going to go somewhere else, right into, you know, the Shadowlands that an old godlike being goes to. And maybe Blizzard will make, even though there is evidence that Yogg-Saron's been active recently, but what Blizz could end up doing is actually just saying, nah, Y'Sharj, Cthulhu, N'Zoth, Yogg, they're all actually dead, but, you know, their essences are over here, and maybe we could see them in the future. But yeah, suffice to say, you're not going to be seeing that much old god corruption, both narratively or literally in your gameplay, once that pre-patch actually kicks in. Now, moving on then, there's a little bit on the topic of corrupted things in general, and that is the Malefic Core stuff. So this is impacting your progression. They're redesigning things a little bit. You will actually get 2 free Malefic Cores each week by completing both Horrific Visions. That's kind of interesting to me. They're sort of accelerating that. They're also making it so you can just simply buy them from Mother for 2,000 Echoes of N'Zoth. I think that's kind of interesting. Blizzard are just in this situation where they made that patch one way, and then they added in a lot more of the player agency and freedom way over here. Just that by the time we've actually reached, you know, current date, a lot of people ain't that interested anymore, or aren't that interested anymore. Now, on that topic, there is one thing that I think people maybe won't be playing, but will be interested in, and that is that, well, the Horrific Vision of fixes that probably drove you absolutely batty are now being nerfed into oblivion a little bit. So, Latent Foot, that's actually now down from a very, very fun 90% maximum move decrease to 50%, and it caps at 10 stacks. I think people will like that. And then, of course, Split Personality. We all love that one. That actually now clones, the clones last a second less, and there's 5 of them down from 6, and the Disorient lasts 2 seconds down from 4. I think that's interesting because those were the affixes that were the most annoying, and then, and especially if you think about the Mythic Plus stuff we brought up earlier in this video, it does conjure up that discussion of when is an affix an interesting twist in the gameplay that you're doing that makes you think about new challenges, and when is it just annoying? And I'd love to know what you think about that. So do let me know what you think about that down below. And you know what, with that said, let's actually hop over to our final thing. It's a little bit of classic where there's not been that much news, but there have been some interesting things happening. There's the Onyxia speed record, 58 seconds by 33 hunters. That's pretty cool. Onyxia was then defeated by a naked raid group, so Onyxia is really just having a bad time these days. And Courage, it's also just around the corner. It lands on the 28th of July. Time to get your mats ready. Jeremy Fiesel actually has been doing some of those tweets advocating for a pre-nerf Cthulhu. I'd certainly think that would be the thing to do because it would be recreating the original experience, which would be kind of exciting to see, even in passing if you're not there. It's just a, you know, WoW Classic. At worst, it's a really cool thing that's happening over there, so I do love to check in with what's up. So, there you go. That is it for the news. If you want to support what we are doing, you can check out the Patreon. You can get the Warlock pin, the Tirnanog sort of art sets, or, you know, art piece that, you know, there's a bit of inspiration from Ardenweald, but that's because Ardenweald is, you know, kind of ganked from Irish mythology. You know, you got Tyrna Scythe in World of Warcraft, you've got Tirnanog in our mythos, so pretty cool. You can check that out, and of course, the other art pack, that's all on Patreon. And if you would like to support our sponsor, Audible, and also support us at the same time, then you could, say, pick up a copy of Shadows Rising with a free 30-day trial, and that helps us out a bunch as well. And you know what? It's a pretty sweet book, and Audible's a pretty damn sweet service as well. So, that's it for me. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.